Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Black power.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Today is Thursday, July 11, 2024. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network, President Joe Biden will be holding a news conference in about 25 minutes to address his campaign, also the NATO conference, as you continue to see pressure placed on him to withdraw from the race. We'll break all of that down right here on today's show. Plus, a recent study from Northeastern University said that the debate performance, the poor one from Biden, had almost no impact on voters' preferences. But it was the Democrats' reaction to the debate has changed the game. Lots we're going to break down. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
2 weeks ago today, President Joe Biden had an awful debate against Donald Trump in Atlanta. In the last 2 weeks, all you've heard are Democrats condemning their candidate and Republicans saying nothing about the enormous lies Donald Trump told in that particular debate. As a result, you've seen now calls for more Democrats for Biden to drop out of the race. They're saying we might lose House seats, we might lose the Senate, we might lose everything. But the problem is the polling data doesn't necessarily show that. It's a lot we're going to break down. In about 20 minutes, Biden will be holding a solo news conference. Democrats have been clamoring for that. Of course, the NATO conference is ending. He's facing calls from a wide variety of folks, especially donors, to get out of the race. The question is that smart? Joining me right now, Lori Daniels Favors, Executive Director of the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College. Joining me from Brooklyn, also Sirius XM radio show host. Lori, I'll start with you before I go to my panel, and that is this here. I've never seen the level of self-destruction in a political campaign. You have Democrats who are reinforcing the biggest negative against their candidate. Republicans fully have accepted a convicted felon who lied in the debate, and they're sitting here saying, y'all go right ahead. What do you make of the insanity of the Democratic Party?
Unfortunately, Roland, I share your incredulity about the whole situation. But for me, this has very little to do with Joseph Biden and much more to do with the very reality that Vice President Kamala Harris might be close to inheriting or sitting in the seat of president than a lot of people wished. And what we're seeing is not the base of the party coming out and demanding that Biden step down, the voters who actually participated in the primary. We're not seeing the poor come out and that Biden step down. You're not seeing Black Americans, either men or women, demand that he step down. Latinos expanded their reach and an appreciation and commitment to voting for Biden. So I think at this point, we can look at who is making these demands. These tend to be very wealthy white men who are from very particular political camps, who have a lot to gain if there is a Trump presidency and all the chaos that will bring with it. So I'm just hoping. I saw Chris Matthews today did an interview, and he was talking about the fact that Joe Biden is kind of built for people to underestimate him. He's not necessarily part of the elite as we tend to think of. I mean, he's more elite as compared to my community, for sure. But for him, being a part of the working class and sort of making that a part of his identity. He sits in that space, but then he's also, in some ways, a bit of an outsider. He was not the natural successor after he served faithfully as Barack Obama's vice president, something that most white men, I think many of us were shocked to see an older white man exhibit that level of deference and commitment to fulfilling that black man's vision, which was a beautiful thing. And then he was passed over for Hillary Clinton. And what we're seeing is a lot of folks from the Clinton camp. We're seeing a lot of folks who are making a lot of demands in the face of absolute facts. Like, how about the fact that the Republicans and the Heritage Foundation have all, since June, they've been saying since 2 days after the debate, if the Democrats tried to remove Biden off the ticket, got the lawsuits already. And whoever this mythical person would be who would replace Joe Biden, what's their ground game? Who are they? And how on earth are you going to be able to galvanize people around that person? Because I'm assuming if they're going to make this a thing, I do not see them pointing to Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris. And again, I think a lot of this has much more to do with the fact that a black woman is this much closer to the presidency. And by this much closer, I mean in the debate, Joe Biden's humanity was on display. The morality of that man was on display. And yet his ability to be one of the most successful presidents as it pertains to legislation. And quite frankly, Joe Biden was not my candidate. He was not somebody that I was going for in 2020. I ultimately did because I needed to not have Trump in office. But he's been a damn good president by like many objective measures. And so the only people who benefit from this are the Democratic elite who aren't even, they don't have a plan beyond let's replace him and get someone on the ticket because we don't think he can win. Well, you had your chance. That's what the whole primary process was for. He got over 80% of the vote in the primary. Some people did run against. I heard folks say, well, those weren't serious candidates. Well, let's, put our grown-up pants on. This is what it is. People made decisions about whether or not they were going to run or not. This is the candidate that the voters are galvanized around. And at this point, I don't have people calling into my show at Sirius saying they want Joe Biden to step down. I have people calling into my show at Sirius saying, what the hell is going on? And why are they ruining this for everybody?
Let me do this here. There's an issue with your microphone, Lori. So let's see if we can get that handled, because it sounded like it was a wind tunnel. So if y'all can handle that for me. Let me bring in my panel right now. Lauren Victoria Burke, Black Press USA, out of Arlington, Virginia. We have, of course, Dr. Greg Carr, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. Also, Christopher Boozy, CEO of Spottable out of New Jersey. Let me go to Christopher. Christopher, you've been tweeting about this, and you keep saying the numbers don't lie. You keep saying that Biden can win. Explain that.
Hey, Martin. And I share Lori's frustration in this because it's insanity. Yes, not only he can win, I think he can win and do better than he did in 2020. The numbers, look, everyone is basing all of this chaos over polls that are garbage. I'm just going to say it like it is. They're garbage polls. The methodology behind these polls are garbage. They're not accurate, and the media is still touting the polls because it drives a narrative. Okay, so let's break it down. First off, Biden, in terms of on the ground, is doing extremely well. I talk to reporters who are covering the campaigns. I talk to people who are I talk to people who are actually interacting with voters, and they all say, the voters are energized. They can't wait to vote for Biden. The debate was not really an issue. Yes, people were a little concerned in terms of, him talking slowly, what was going on. But they were not saying, hey, he should step aside. They were not saying, hey, he should be replaced or anything like that. Now, these are voters on the ground. So the first thing for me when I look at if a candidate going down is one, what kind of support are they getting in terms of their donors? When I mean donors, I'm talking about small grassroots donors. Two, when I'm looking at numbers, and I'm not talking about polls because I don't look at polls, I'm looking at social media. What are people saying on social media? Are people saying, once again, she should step aside? Or, hey, I'm supporting him, I'm behind him? You got to parse through the the bots, the trolls, the fake accounts, things like that, and get down to the actual people. And once again, the majority of folks are like, what is going on with the Democratic Party? We're supporting him. We don't want to see him replaced. So then the other thing is historical data. Replacing a candidate, for example, before we get into even how I know Biden can win, historical data, like with LBJ stepping aside, run, that was a disaster, an absolute disaster when Democrats did that. And I have been tweeting, if Democrats do that again, whether they replace them with someone totally different or if they replace them with VP Harris, they will get slaughtered in November. And the reason being is because first you're giving up the incumbency, you give up the bully pulpit. That's the first thing. Secondly, you're going to end up going into a convention where it's going to cause a lot of chaos. Remember, there were millions of people who voted during the primaries. They want Biden. They like Biden. And there are a lot of people who also like VP Harris and who would love for VP Harris to be the nominee. The problem, though, with that is it's a little too cute and it's a little too late. If you replace Biden and put VP Harris, and there are going to be people who are going to feel like their vote didn't matter, that it is the quote-unquote elites picking whoever. So that's going to cause chaos going into the convention and out of convention. And if there's chaos, they're not going to win. You have to have unity. And then the other thing is, as your previous guest stated, if they replace VP Harris and put someone totally new in there, that's it. I mean, that's game over. You're talking about losses up and down the ballot because, once again, who's this person? Are they going to be able to galvanize folks in 4-ish months? Are they going to be able to get the base? I've heard people float Gavin Newsom, Whitmore. Gretchen Whitmore. It's not going to work. So in terms of November, before all of this happened, I have been keeping track of this stuff. And I've been saying for a long time, not only do I believe Biden can flip Florida, which people think I'm crazy with saying that, but also North Carolina. The reason is this is going to be the first election where abortion is on a ballot. 11 states have some sort of, abortion-related measure on the ballot. As we have seen before, Democrats have done extremely well time abortions on the ballot. Then you have the conviction. You have the 2 impeachments, you have the indictments, and on that you have, once again, the Supreme Court ruling immunity and the Roe v. Wade. If all of that is on the table, I do not see a path for Donald Trump. There is no path. But when you listen to the pundits, you listen to these analysts, you would think it was the complete and total opposite of that. It's just not true. Lastly, every cycle since 2016, Democrats have continuously overperformed. They overperformed in 2018. They overperformed in 2020. As we know, in 2022, when they talked about the red wave, they said, the red wave, Democrats are going to get clobbered. Not only did Democrats gain a seat in the Senate, they barely lost the House, where it was predicted that they were going to lose 20 to 30 seats. And then across the country, they also did well in state, local races, government, shit like that. So this is going to be the very first election, presidential election, where we have abortion on the ballot. And I do believe that is galvanizing people, especially obviously women, like we've never seen before. So once again, I agree with your previous, and I share the same frustration that Democrats are actually hurting themselves by all of this. Yeah. Public, it's not.
So, Lauren Victoria Berg, here's a perfect example. So, a poll came out today regarding Latino voters. Go to my iPad, Henry. Matt Barreto, one of the top pollsters. It's 53-36, Biden over Trump. But this is what he said. He said that Biden can increase his advantage from plus 70 to plus 30 among Latinos if he do several things. Here's the thing that I keep saying, Lauren. It's July 11th. The election is not July 12th. So when I'm watching these folks who are saying, oh my God, there's no path to victory, you literally have 117 days to actually change the game. So I don't understand the logic of the donors and these analysts and podcasters and Axelrod and others when the Washington Post poll today shows it's tied. What the hell?
It shows that it's tied. I think that what you're seeing is sort of a lack and a reluctance of certain quadrants within the Democratic Party to finally get off the stage. I think the Clinton crew is still sort of in there wanting to be something. 100 days is really not a long period of time, I think, in a political campaign. They have 39 days to the convention. And this is problematic to have prominent people in a political party effectively destroying their presumptive nominee for the presidency of the United States in public, by the way, every night on CNN. And it's for some cases for some members of Congress showing up again and again and again on cable TV to say negative things about the presumptive nominee of your party. If you think that communication strategy, no matter how anybody might feel about anything, I can assure you that if they keep doing that, they're going to lose, not because of what happened on June 27, but in the last 14 days, but because of what happened in the last 14 days. I actually think most people out there and in calling people and talking to members of Congress about their constituents, most people out there do not have the same ways that people do in the Beltway or people who are standing in the White House briefing room or in the U.S. Capitol. There's a disconnect there. And when President Biden at the beginning of this week talked about elites, I think he hit the nail on the head because there's a group in there who thinks differently from what there's a group of elite people, frankly, who are in the media who think that everybody thinks like them. And as somebody from New York, I get it. The New York Times seems to think that everything they say is important, but most normal people are not thinking that way. It's as simple as that. There is some, in Virginia, we have a guy named Larry Sabato who did reflect in the first few days that he thought that there was going to be some distance between Biden and Trump in the polling numbers that he says he saw fairly quickly. But it does take a few weeks to figure out whether or not something like June 27 really has some resonance. And I don't know that we have the answer to that, but I'll tell you what, it's hard. I think it's hard for me to believe that a Republican Party who can't get the popular vote in over 24 years is suddenly going to get the popular vote now and this year, running a lunatic and a pathological liar as their lead candidate versus somebody who is trusted but is going through a trial and tribulation right now. It is problematic. I think the Democratic Party is making a tragic mistake. And I think there's a lack of leadership there. I think if Speaker Pelosi was there, quite frankly, she would have told the caucus to shut up by now. They are doing damage to themselves. And you have to remember, just lastly, the only members of Congress care about is their own election. That's it. Once they sense that their election will be jeopardized by the person at the top of the ticket for whatever reason, they will bail, and that's what you're seeing. And, of course, the vice president is not – the vice president – it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate this if they push Biden out of there, which I frankly doubt it. I think he's dug in. But if they were to do that, if it's not Vice President Harris, they're going to see some – if they're seeing rancor now, they better get ready.
Greg Carr, here's the thing that people need to understand. This is not about – oh, my God, Dems love Joe Biden. If you look at the numbers, they thought he was old in 2020.
Right.
But what happened when they went and voted? And so what I'm looking at is, after all of this rancor, it's still 46-46. Trump has a ceiling. So what it means, Democrats, get off your asses, drive your base to the polls to win. But you don't sit here on July 11th and it's like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I mean, this poll came out. It is hysteria driven by one side, and they've spent 2 weeks attacking their own and not spending the same amount of time going after Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes no sense unless you don't care. I echo everything that has been said so far. What Larry said about Vice President Harris, Christopher, what you said, Brother Boozy, as it relates to these polls flying in the face of conventional logic, and of course, Lauren, exactly what you said. This is about naked self-interest. This morning, Dominic, Master and Gello reporting in The Hill, puts this on Obama. and I'm with him 100%, because George Clooney called Obama before he put that op-ed in the New York Times. They were at that fundraiser they had a couple of weeks ago, and according to the reporting, Obama didn't tell him not to do it, didn't tell him to do it, which sent the signal. Most of these people, like that swamp creature out of Louisiana, James Carville, they are former either Clinton operatives or Obama operatives, not looking for a smoking gun, and there's other things that will be revealed. Maybe they know something about the president's health that we don't. We'll see in a minute, maybe or maybe not. But what we're seeing is Pelosi, for example, telling people in swing districts, do what you got to do to survive, but wait until after NATO. NATO wrapped up today. What we're seeing clearly is that there is an orchestration. Obama, and it's forced Joe Biden to sound a little bit like Bernie Sanders. He's waging war against the elite. Ironically, Sanders is all in for Biden, as are the voters. So I'll just end with this. The New York Times, whether they got an axe to grind, whether the Sulzbergers or whoever has got the axe to grind with Biden because he wouldn't give them interviews or whatever, when you're looking at fools like Brett Stevens on their op-ed page, you expect it from Brett Stevens or Ross Dohart, maybe even from a guy like Nicholas Kristof. But here comes, all of a sudden, Paul Krugman. Here comes these other, today's op-ed pages is another bloodbath. Nobody reading the New York Times and the Washington Post but us. Ignore these fools, and whatever will be. The governor of Michigan saying, well, maybe you should take a cognitive test. We know you want to be the president, Big Gretch. We know you mad still because he didn't pick you and pick Kamala Harris because he needed to win, like Clyburn and them told him. And then there looms the governor of California, because the bottom line is this. If Biden is reelected and steps down before, then Kamala Harris has the power of the incumbency. And you know who looms after Kamala Harris? The governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. Y'all are soft white nationalists, and you're willing to risk all the rest of us because of your political ambition.
Lori, here's the thing that jumps out at me, Lori. And again, you have Democrats who are sitting here going, let's watch every move for mistake. Well, the last couple days, no mistake, so no coverage. You have Brian Stelter go on CNN and say, well, he's been almost invisible since the debate. 18 appearances in 9 days. And I tweeted him, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? That's not invisible. So what you're saying is, you are seeing a cabal to saying, the hell with the voters, we're gonna decide, and I made it clear, if they think they can skip Vice President Harris, they are going to launch a civil war in the party that is going to destroy them for decades.
Roland, they can try it if they want to. I guarantee they will live to regret it. But unfortunately, so will the rest of us. The Trump campaign is effective. The Republican Party is effectively broke. They are being bled by all of the legal battles, and they don't have a great ground game in a number of swing states. This is a winnable contest. And in addition to all of that, everything that Chris Boozy and all the other guests said is I absolutely concur. But we also have Project 2025 right there, like right there. And if we were talking about that and educating people about that, about the threats to our democracy, and comparing that to the advances that we have won. And I know that a lot of us in our community, we want to see the president issue the legislation that's got black in it. We want the black housing program. We want the black affirmative action program, the black healthcare plan. Listen, we live in America as it is, not in the America as we would want it to be. As soon as that were to happen, we know that the white folks who are very upset about black advancement would file a lawsuit and that legislation would be canceled. So we have to be more sophisticated as the electorate. What are the programs and the policies and the positions that have been very advantageous to black people? I had somebody call and say, well, what has Biden done for black people? You can literally Google what has Biden done for black people, and the fact sheet is immense. None of it says the black plan, but it is extraordinarily important that we become way more facile in thinking about what skin we have in the game. I also just think that it's important that even as we look at Vice President Kamala Harris, who I believe will be a phenomenal president, we are in one of the most anti-black, anti-woman social moments that we have been, certainly in my lifetime. And I know I'm not the oldest one on this panel, but the reality is, for decades, we have been seeing this increase and a surge in the most recent years in anti-Blackness and anti-woman sentiment. And the idea that Vice President Kamala Harris would be able to just sort of waltz into that position and take it and run, I think is ludicrous. And I think it undermines her ability to be the very effective president that I think she's ultimately going to be. But if we were talking more about Project 2025, then we could also talk about Agenda 180, which is Project 2025's day-by-day plan for 180 days as to how that plan is going to get implemented. All of this energy focusing on a president who has been, by most accounts, one of the most successful presidents in our nation's history as it pertains to leveling the playing field, and certainly not perfect. I mean, it's Joe Biden. Come on, we ain't got to love Joe Biden to recognize that it's far better to have been under this presidency than it would have been under his opponent. But to think that we have the most successful president that we don't had in generations, particularly for Black people and Black interests, and white moneyed elite can just come in and say we don't like him because he's too old. We knew he was old. He been old. We were telling y'all that when Obama picked him. So this is not new. White supremacy is just reinventing itself. And I love the soft white nationalism, because what we need to be very clear about is we don't do permanent friends. We don't do permanent enemies. We got permanent issues. And my issue is Black people. And I need Black people to not come out of this in a situation where there is chaos, because I don't have an underground railroad, Brother Roland. And I don't know if you do or if anybody else do. I didn't get the memo about who's building the underground railroad for our community if this goes very, very right. And by that, I mean if the Republicans were to come into power. Project 2025 is a phenomenally detailed vision statement of every step they're going to take. And we just don't have the time to deal with all this chaos and foolishness. We got grown folk business to take care of. We got community to build. This is ridiculous.
Then, of course, you had Donald Trump claiming he knew nothing about it. But guess what? The Heritage Foundation, the author of Project 2025, they are lead sponsor of the Republican National Convention. Lori, when you started your comments, you talk about something that Chris Matthews said on MSNBC. Now, I think Chris Matthews can be way out of his mind. But he's white, he's Irish, and he knows Biden, who's white and Irish. Here's what he said.
Or to the great unknown for Democrats. Many Democrats appear willing to take that risk and see what's behind the door. What do you think?
Well, I think we have to look at all the facts, and one of the facts is Joe Biden. He's a fact. This guy has earned his way to this position in life, United States president. He got here the long way. In 1972, he ran against Caleb Boggs, a 3-term congressman, a 2-term governor, a 2-term U.S. senator, and he beat him. He beat him well. And he rode around in a car the next day and was celebrated for having pulled that upset, because he put out no television in Wilmington or Delaware. He put out literature the weekend before, delivered by volunteers, which was a brilliant piece of literature. John Martilla did it. He is a politician who's been good at it. He's been reelected every time since then in Delaware with pretty healthy majorities. In life, he lost his wife and he lost his daughter, and he found Jill. Now, who's he going to listen to, Jill or George Clooney? I'm telling you, it's personal. He's had the elite, and it's so true about the elite. He is absolutely right about the elite. Look at President Obama. He served for 8 years loyally, and yet Obama backed Hillary Clinton for president and didn't back him. But I hear he never even invited him upstairs. He had a good reason to be resentful, but he isn't. He puts up with it with the elite. But right now, he's got the poor people. He's got minorities. He's got Hispanics. He's going to put out the labor. He's going to hold that base of the Democratic Party, which he will need in November. And I'm telling you, people are going to end up rooting for him in October, because he will have a comeback. And in this elite-fashioned attack on him, they're going to pay for it. But in the end, they're going to end up voting for him. So I think Biden will be the little guy. He'll be the Democrat in this race, the true Democrat. And he's going to get people to turn for him in October. It's going to be stunning. He is not quitting. He is not.
So here's the thing. So for all the panelists, it's about 6:36. We're waiting for the president to come on. So I need you to keep your comments extremely tight so I can get to them. But Christopher, the point that you just heard right there, that is this here. Democratic voters are sitting here going, listen, I know this guy. You got amazing economic news, inflation down, gas prices down. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And again, Democrats are sacrificing the telling of a successful story, of a successful presidency, because they're freaking out because of a 90-minute debate. Christopher.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
I said you've got Democrats freaking out, not talking about a successful presidency. You've got great economic numbers, and they're spending all of their time saying, oh my God, he's too old, he's not gonna work. And you're risking a brokered convention. You're risking chaos for the next 6 weeks, and you're trying to create on the fly a national campaign if it's not Kamala Harris. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everyone on the panel pretty much is here, and I really don't have an answer to what the heck is going on. I'll keep going back to it's insanity. They're on the path to, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a historic win, but definitely a win up and down the ballot. And I just don't understand why they're trying to push him out over a 90-minute debate. You cannot erase 3.5 years or plus years and just erase all of that for 90 minutes. He had a bad debate. Obama had a bad debate in 2012. He went on to win. Hillary Clinton had, 3 great debates? She won all of her debates, and she lost. And let's not forget, the vast majority of the polls had her winning, landslide. And as we know, she lost. So I firmly believe that Biden not only needs to stay in the race, Democrats need to stop what they're doing. They're doing more damage than anything else. And at the end of the day, I just don't know who they're going to replace him with. If they replace him with VP Harris, it's going to be problems. If they replace him with someone else outside of the ticket, it's going to be a problem. But I will say this. I agree that this is more about VP Harris than it is about Biden. Just really quickly, if he is reelected, which I do believe he will be, unless, God forbid, something happens to him, 2 years in, that means she would ascend to the presidency. She will have 2 years. She will have the incumbency. She will be not reelected. She will be elected.
Right.
And then she can then be reelected. So not only she can have 8 years plus the 2 years because he stepped down or whatever. So yeah, I do think this has a lot to do with her and not him.
Lauren, here's what I don't understand. How do you get rid of your plan A and you do not have a plan B locked in?
Because you want to panic alongside CNN and the New York Times. I have no idea. I mean, that's a good question. If you're not saying, and in the beginning, the first statements from the first few people who came out, they did say, I would support Vice President Harris. I mean, that's an important element of this. You can't just take away your presumptive nominee and have no plan B there, which a lot of these people don't have. And I think we should recognize the fact that there may, in fact, be something cognitively wrong with the president. This is not necessarily the way you deal with it. It is destructive to the Democratic Party, the way that they are messaging. But you're right, Roland. They have no plan B, and that is obvious.
And Greg, I'm sitting here. Rob Reiner tweets, we need a younger candidate. Okay, who? Tommy Vietor, John Favreau, all of these folks, another candidate. I keep saying, name them. It's amazing how they don't want to do that. But so let's say Biden step down and then we'll figure it out later.
Roland, as Lauren just said, there may be something physically wrong with Joe Biden. I've been calling him the mummy since he won the primaries. But let me be very clear, and I think we've all said it, and you started with it. It isn't about Biden. Lurie said that. It's about Project 2025. It's about open white fascism and nationalism. What these soft white nationalists in the Democratic Party are willing to do with their naked political ambition, whether it be Congress people in swing districts or whoever, the Hollywood folks like Rob Reiner, irrelevant. George Clooney, irrelevant. What they're doing is exercising and doing the bidding of those whose naked political naked political ambition they're putting ahead of the interests of the people who live in this country. To me, it's really not that complicated. Malcolm X would say, you're speaking a language they don't understand. They don't care. 10 years from now, and let's follow what you just said, Chris. Let's say the vice president comes in, becomes the president, runs, is elected, runs, is reelected. 10 years from now, in 2034 in the United States of America, when a now 45-year-old, then 55-year-old, meaning 4 years younger than I am now, Wes Moore declares his candidacy, the electorate in this country looks very different. Gretchen Whitmer knows it's over for her, and so does the governor of California, who I suspect is in these rooms too. The point is this is whiteness. And it's not all whiteness, it's these tiny elites versus everybody else. And yeah, they'll be nice, nasty, and say, we support President Harris. If they do it, Luria has already said it, the Republicans are going to file lawsuits to keep her off the ballot. If she does get on the ballot, you have now alienated the very people who can't afford for the Republicans to get in power, which means some of us will sit it out, unfortunately, putting the political gun to our heads and blowing our political brains out, because the day this man is inaugurated, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito say we'll retire. Hopefully Sonia Sotomayor can make it another term or not, with God bless her. And then everybody who's a criminal gets pardoned, and then they set up the internment camps. We're not playing. So Reiner, Carville, all you people, talk all you want, baby. You are showing us who you are, and we're going to roll over you like we're going to roll over the white nationalists in the Democrat and the Republican Party.
And the point right there, Lori, I think is important, and that is this here. These rich donors, let's be honest, George Clooney, he's got an estate in Italy. They don't have to worry about the downstream of Project 2025. Everybody else does. Lori?
She's frozen.
But that's the thing for me, y'all. What I'm seeing are individuals who are speaking their self-interest. And again, this is very simple. If you believe that Biden should step down, have the courage to say and replace him with who? But they won't. Because guess what? It's not Vice President Kamala Harris. They want a brokered debate. CNN would love a brokered debate because their ratings are broken. All these media folk, they would love for Trump to be back. And that's the other deal, Lori. They would love the chaos. And don't forget, David Zaslav, the CEO of CNN's parent company, he's made it clear. He says, I don't care who wins, but we want deregulation. What administration has been the biggest opponent to mergers and monopolies? Biden-Harris. So big business wants Biden out of the way.
And they have a lot to gain financially, which is why, for me, it's very important that we cut through the noise. We're in a moment right now where, as again, our people don't have a lot of options right now. And I would love to be able to have an option electorally where I'm picking the best of the best. But we're Black in America, and we just have to recognize that right now, my question when I go into the ballot box or into the ballot booth is, which of these candidates is either going to help my community the most or hurt my community the least? These folks who are driving this narrative, who have very little to lose if this goes well. George Clooney, how often is he actually laying his bed on a head in America? And I don't know, but the fact that he has wealth beyond my wildest imagination and has options and plans. Meanwhile, the overwhelming majority of our people don't even have passports. We don't have we're not built in a way that allows us to be ready for what would happen in 180 days, 6 months. So from January until July, Project 2025 is very clear, and they are really effective at implementing oppression because all they have to do is rinse and repeat what their ancestors have done. We are trying to create an America where we can thrive, where we can have some semblance of freedom that will allow us to organize so that we can create Black liberation. But right now, what's happening with this narrative is extraordinarily dangerous. dangerous. It is dangerous for us. We don't have plan Bs. The Dems who are driving this narrative damn sure don't have a plan B, which is why I hope, as problematic as Chris Matthews may be, and he is highly problematic, I do hope, and I think that what he says is very valid. And I think that we are pissing off the base. You're getting more people who were on Biden who are like, no, what, are you serious? Now I'm advocating for Biden, when as before I was merely tolerating him. So they are having some unintended consequences. I hope that we, the voters, and we, the people who are doing the work on the ground to educate the voters, will be able to cut through the noise and make sure that we get our folks on code, because I don't have an underground railroad, and I certainly don't know of anybody who can build one between now and July of next year.
Lori Daniels Favors, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. I'm going to go to a quick break. We come back. Hopefully the news conference will start. If not, we're going to share some of what Vice President Kamala Harris had to say today in North Carolina. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Next on the Black Table with me, Greg Carr. Dr. Gerald Horne, a man regarded by many as the most important historian of our time. He provides us a history lesson I'm betting you've never heard before.
Texas enslavers who planned to continue the conflict even after Appomattox, even after the formal surrender of Robert E. Lee.
Dr. Horne talks about his new book, The Counter-Revolution of 1836, Texas, Slavery, and Jim Crow, and the Roots of U.S. Fascism. You do not want to miss this conversation. Only on the Black Table, right here on the Black Star Network.
Hello, I'm Jamia Pugh. I am from Coatesville, Pennsylvania, just an hour right outside of Philadelphia.
My name is Jasmine Pugh. I'm also from Coatesville, Pennsylvania.
You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay right here.
All right, folks, welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're still waiting for President Joe Biden to begin his news conference. But what we're going to do is, earlier today, Vice President Kamala Harris, she was in North Carolina for an event, and we live streamed that on the Black Star Network. And so what I want to do is I want to share some of her remarks with you. And so here is her speaking today in North Carolina.
Four more years. That's what we're looking forward to. So as I was saying, this is an extraordinary community of people who have always fought for civil rights and for the rights of all people to speak when it is their turn to speak. And of course, all voices are important, and I say that in true sincerity. But I want to talk a bit about the work of this community in the context of the civil rights movement. My parents met when they were active in the civil rights movement. They took me to those marches when I was in a stroller. And I grew up then in a community like this one, where the people who were raising us, I look at Devin, I think about my childhood. We grew up in a community of people who, when we were young, they told us literally, you are young, gifted, and Black. They taught us that we could do anything and should never be burdened by the limitations of other people to be able or not be able to see what can be. And this is that community who understands and can see what is possible unburdened by what has been. We collectively, I know, were raised and taught to understand we have a duty to serve in the fight for freedom, opportunity, and justice for all. And it is that sense of duty, not if you feel like it, duty, which guides us at this very moment. We are today 117 days out from the election. And I know many of us have been involved in these elections every 4 years, and nearly every time we say, this is the one. This here is the one. This is the one. The most existential, consequential, and important election of our lifetime. Now, we always knew this election would be tough, and the past few days have been a reminder that running for president of the United States is never easy, nor should it be. But one thing we know about our president, Joe Biden, is that he is a fighter. He is a fighter. And he is the first to say, when you get knocked down, you get back up. You get back up. So we will continue to fight, and we will continue to organize, and in November we will win. We will win, because we know what's at stake. And in this election, there can be no doubt who you can count on to fight for you when it counts. It's simple. President Biden and I fight for the American people. Donald Trump does not. He fights for himself. Roy talked about it. Look at the issue of affordable health care. When Donald Trump was in the White House, he tried more than 60 times, to end the Affordable Care Act, to take health care back from millions of Americans, including 3 million Black Americans, to once again give insurance companies the power to deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. You remember that? Remember what that was like? When people were being denied health care because of a pre-existing condition? Children with asthma? Women who had survived breast cancer? Grandparents with diabetes? Let's not forget what not too long ago that kind of perspective means and meant to real people, our relatives, our friends. President Joe Biden and I, on the other hand, have defended the Affordable Care Act and made it stronger. Because we know access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege for those who can afford it. With your support, we also have the strength to finally take on Big Pharma and lower the cost of prescription drugs. It was with the knowledge that Black people are 60% more likely to have diabetes, Latinos 70% more likely to have diabetes, that we capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month. Because we listen and heard and are clear about who we represent. We are finally making it so that medical debt can no longer be used against your credit score. There's the issue of student loan debt. When Donald Trump was in the White House, he tried to end student loan forgiveness for public servants. Who are our public servants? Will they include our teachers, nurses, firefighters? Joe Biden, and on the other hand, Joe Biden and I, well, we have forgiven student loan debt for nearly 5 million Americans. And twice as much for our public servants. We, together with you, have also taken on the issue of gun violence, knowing the tragic reality. Greensboro, gun violence today in America is the #1 killer of the children of America. Think about that. Not car accidents, not some form of cancer. Gun violence is the #1 killer of the children of America. And Black Americans are 10 times as likely to be the victim of gun homicide. You know, over the years, you all know as a former prosecutor, over the years, I have held the hands of far too many mothers and fathers and tried to comfort them after their child was killed by gun violence, both in mass shootings and what we call everyday gun violence. So Joe Biden and I decided to prioritize this issue, and to address this crisis, we passed the first major gun safety law in nearly 30 years. A bipartisan law to strengthen background checks. We created the first White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which I lead. We invested $1 billion to hire mental health counselors in public schools to help heal the mental trauma of gun violence. Because far too many of our children go to school every day learning about how this could impact them in a very real way. Last fall, I did a tour speaking with Gen Z. I love Gen Z. And I'd ask them, raise your hand if you have ever had to, in schools, anytime between kindergarten and 12th grade, I'd ask them, have you had to endure an active shooter drill? And to the older adults here, I will tell you it is bone-chilling when they respond. Almost every hand went up. These are very real issues. On the other hand, Donald Trump opposed reasonable gun safety reforms and cut funding for gun violence prevention. We simply know we cannot count on Donald Trump to help keep America and Americans safe, not here at home and not on the world stage. And yes, I am also talking then about national security. This week, our president, Joe Biden, is hosting more than 30 global leaders in Washington, D.C. for the NATO summit. Now, NATO is the greatest military alliance the world has ever known. And thanks to our president, Joe Biden, thanks to Joe Biden, if there is one single person who deserves credit in the world for strengthening NATO, making it stronger, making it more united and more effective, that is Joe Biden. That is Joe Biden. And having made it more effective, then together with our allies around the globe, we are standing up to the dictator Putin. All to ensure America is strong and Americans are safe. On the other hand, do watch, because it's not new. On the other hand, watch as Donald Trump has embraced Putin. Watch that. It's not just happening today, it's been happening. As Trump, threatened to abandon NATO and encouraged Putin to invade our allies. He even said Russia can, and I'm going to quote him now, and forgive the use of the word, but he said, quote, Russia can, quote, do whatever the hell they want. And he wants to be the president of the United States? And understand, as Trump bows down to dictators, he makes America weak. And that is disqualifying for someone who wants to be commander-in-chief of the United States of America. That is disqualifying. So all of this to say, there is so much at stake in this moment. And last week, we were again reminded of that fact. when the Supreme Court basically told this individual who had been convicted of fraud that going forward, he will be immune for activity we know he is prepared to engage in if he gets back into the White House. This is not 2016, this is not 2020. Understand the significance of what the Supreme Court just did. And consider that in the context of the fact that Donald Trump has openly vowed, if reelected, he will be a dictator on day one. That he will weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies, round up peaceful protesters and throw them out of our country, and even, and I will quote, terminate the United States Constitution. Let us be very clear. Someone who suggests we should, quote, terminate our Constitution should never again have the chance to stand behind a microphone and never again have the chance to stand behind the seal of the President of the United States of America. And some of you, of course, have heard that Trump's advisors have created a 900-page blueprint for their agenda for the second term if they were to have one. They call it Project 2025. And it includes, check this out, it includes a plan to cut Social Security. It includes a plan to repeal our $35 cap on insulin. It includes a plan to eliminate the Department of Education and end programs like Head Start. I say to the teachers and the students here. And Project 2025 outlines a plan to limit access to contraception and for a nationwide abortion ban, with or without an act of Congress. And on the topic of reproductive freedom, I know we all agree, one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk, if she chooses, with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but not her government telling her what to do. If implemented, Project 2025 would be the latest attack in Donald Trump's full-on assault on reproductive freedom, because we remember then President Donald Trump handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court because he intended for them to undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as he intended, they did. Now, over 20 states have Trump abortion bans. Now, in the South, where the majority of Black women live, every state except for Virginia has a ban, many with no exceptions even for rape or incest. And Trump proudly takes credit for overturning Roe. Make no mistake, if he gets the chance, he will sign a national abortion ban and outlaw abortion in every single state, but we are not going to let that happen. We are not going to let that happen because we have worked too hard and fought too long to see our daughters grow up in a world with fewer rights than our mothers. And when Congress passes a law that restores the reproductive freedoms of Roe, our President, Joe Biden, will sign it. So ultimately, in this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? That's the question being posed to each one of us. Do we want to live in a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate? We each, and here's the beauty in this, we each have the power to answer that question. We have the power. In North Carolina, we were born for a time such as this. We were born for a time such as this. If the Supreme Court says the laws do not apply to Donald Trump, if extremists in Congress continue to bow down to him, if people like Mike Pence are not around to stand up to him, our last line of defense is the ballot box. Your vote, your voice. We, the people, have the power. So today I ask North Carolina, are you ready to make your voices heard? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris today in North Carolina. We're still awaiting President Joe Biden to begin this news conference. At the conclusion of the NATO conference, we're going to go to a break. We'll be right back on the Black Star Network.
On the next, A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie. People can't live with them, can't live without them. Our relationships often have more ups and downs than a boardwalk roller coaster, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Trust your gut. Whenever your gut is like, this isn't healthy, this isn't right, I don't like the way that I'm being treated. This goes for males and females. Trust your gut, and then whenever that gut feeling comes, have a conversation.
Knowing how to grow or when to go, a step-by-step guide on the next A Balanced Life on Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy, financial therapy, what it is and why it may be exactly what you need.
So when you think about financial therapy, what we're talking about is how do we learn to live with our money in a way that is congruent with our values, that we understand our emotions about money, we understand our beliefs and our behaviors.
That's right here, only on Black Star Network.
Coming soon to the Black Star Network.
I still have my NFL contract in my house. I have it in a case. It's 4 of them for my 4-year contract. I got a $600,000 signing bonus. My base salary for that first year was $150,000. Matter of fact, $150,000. $150,000. That's what I made. $150,000. Now think about it. My signing bonus was a forgivable loan, supposedly. When I got traded to the Colts, they made me pay back my signing bonus to them. I had to give them their $600,000 back. Wow. Yeah, I was so pissed. Because, man, I try to be a man of my word. I'm like, you, I'll give you your money back. You know, even though I know I earned that money, right. I gave them money back. I gave them $600,000 back. But yet, I was this malcontent. I was a bad guy. I'm about the money. It wasn't about the money. It was about doing right. Because I looked at, because you look at contract. Look at John Elway. John Elway was making $1 million, $800,000. I was making $150,000. I mean, I was doing everything. And I'm like, but yet I got so many letters, you so I just play for free and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you don't forget that kind of stuff. Right. That stuff is hurtful.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Latasha from the A.
And you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, folks, welcome back. Still waiting for President Joe Biden to begin this news conference. Despite numerous news articles, political pundits, and calls for Biden to end his re-election campaign, a new Northeastern University study finds that the president's June 27th debate performance has had almost no impact on the voters' preferences. 94% of those surveyed who had said before the debate that they were Biden supporters said they would continue to support the president. But just 86% of those who indicated support for Trump before the debate said they would continue to do so. Now, if you listen to that and then listen to all the rhetoric afterwards, you go, what the hell is going on? L. Joy Williams, of course, a longtime activist strategist, also a Sirius XM radio show host, joins us right now. And L. Joy, just what do you make of the insanity that you're seeing among Democrats trying to get Joe Biden out of the race? No plan B, nothing about Vice President Kamala Harris, and they are creating dissension in July when the election is less than 120 days away.
It's absolutely reprehensible to watch this unfold, because this is an issue of media making. Right, is that it's something for pundits and, cable news talking heads to continue the conversation on, instead of paying attention to the political landscape and what is happening around us, who is on the opposite side. And instead of focusing on that, they need something else to drum up viewership. Right? Because if we can keep a speculation that there may be some drama at the convention, then that means more people will be tuned in and will watch our channels to see if there's drama at the convention. Our ad sales and all of that stuff will go up. That literally is what I believe this is all about, because it's not as if there's some huge mass of voters or of Democrats calling for Biden to step aside. Out of the 200 or something, the 300, both from the House, the Senate, and other leadership, I think with the last count was like 9 or 10. Right? And some of who are not even in a position on a federal level to make that decision. And so at this point, I believe that Biden is doing the right thing, which is I ran for the American people, and I'm going to continue to hear from and speak to the American people. And as you pointed out, none of this is swaying people from supporting him. And, the question I really have, besides they have no plan B and skipping over the vice president, is if we were actually in the streets doing the work that we need to be doing in order to win, then I would have maybe a little bit more sympathetic ear to people who are bringing up this concern. But we're not. Those donors that have the concern, how much are you investing in supporting the organizations that need that money now so that they can continue to be on the doors and on the phones and engaging people? That is the work that we need to do to win. And all of this conversation and talk and releasing statements and letters and everything, having serious concerns, take your serious concerns and get out in the street and actually do some work.
Christopher Boozy, L. Joy made a point there about infrastructure. Let's be clear. Right now, Biden-Harris has about 1,000 staffers, 100 field offices. If Joe Biden drops out and you don't pick Vice President Kamala Harris, you can't transfer those assets to other candidates. You can't transfer the money. So you have an infrastructure problem if you don't go with Vice President Harris. I don't understand how these people don't realize that.
Once again, it's insanity. Legally, you can't transfer the money because that money is for the Biden-Harris ticket. So legally, they can't. And as you pointed out, the infrastructure on the ground, if you replace both and you try to plop 2 new people in there, it's virtually impossible to be able to then set up a ground game and be competitive in November. And let's not forget who I don't know who this magic person or persons will be, but they're going to have to then introduce themselves to the American public. And just because someone may be popular in their state does not mean they're going to be popular nationally. I mean, we saw that with Ron DeSantis. You know, he was supposed to be the person to take on Trump, and that fizzled out pretty quickly. So, you know, I really honestly don't understand what these folks think they're going to be able to do in terms of pulling Biden out and putting somebody in. It doesn't work that way. And one other thing, Roland, that's that's been driving me also crazy about this whole thing. Let's pretend we could do this, right? Let's pretend that we could take whoever and put them and replace Biden and Harris. How are they going to get that person or that ticket on every ballot? It's not going to happen. It's basically too late. And we talked about that a bit earlier, but there will be legal changes, and more than likely that candidate will not be on every ballot.
L. Joy, here's something else that I'm just sitting here like. I saw this story the other day. Here we go to my iPad. You got New York Democrats, your state. Oh my God, we might lose New York. What the hell? These blue states, are you trying to tell me? And all of a sudden, Donald Trump is going to win Minnesota. He's going to win New York State. He's going to win Illinois.
And if he does, it is because of a failure of leadership and work. The reason why we lost a congressional seat is a lack in the failure of the governor at that time to really invest in redistricting efforts. In order to do that resulted into us not counting enough people in order to keep our seats. Then fast forward, when we do get to the midterm election, it was the lack of investment in a coordinated strategy to protect and expand the congressional districts to make sure we retained what we had. So again, it is not because of one individual man at the top of the ticket. It is because of the lack of work. And that's what is really bothering me so much about this, as they are asking one man to step aside as if he is the only one that has to do the work in order to win in November. And that's not the case. If you're talking about winning to protect democracy, that is not an effort for one man. That is an effort for all of us to come together and do our respective part. And so Biden is doing his part, right, in carrying the banner. Harris is doing her part in carrying the banner for the party. And we need everybody else to do their part. And if you're a donor, invest now in the resources that people need in order to continue the work. If you're a talking head, you need to invest in talking up what we are voting for, not just what we are voting against. If you're an individual activist, you need to make sure that you are working within your sphere of influence to make sure that people understand the misinformation and the disinformation that's being sowed, that people understand what's at stake, and to understand what we will be able to do with a second term of a Biden-Harris administration. There's still voting rights on the line. There's still issues related to gun violence on the line. We are going to be able to do much more if we have a president like Biden and also Vice President Harris in the White House. We are able to do more when we are in control of Congress. And that is what people should be focused on, not one 90-minute debate.
Lauren, on that point there, I mean, you're seeing these blue stuff. You take New Hampshire, okay? So the folks in New Hampshire are still caught in their feelings because the primary was changed. Well, I'm sorry. You don't have the right to be first in the nation and say screw everybody else. Yeah. And so this is the childishness that we're seeing in the country right now.
Yeah, pretty much. How you doing, El Joy? I'm from New York. I was born in the Bronx. There's no way that the Republicans are going to win New York. That's not going to happen. It just shows you the mania that El Joy already pointed out in the media on this topic. There's just a lot of strange things going on. I think certainly the media is in a failed business model, as you had mentioned before, Roland. They want Donald Trump in there to make money. I don't care what anyone's. I'll never be able to prove it, but everything that they do is to get him into office, to drive excitement, to drive traffic to these websites, and to drive attention. And I cannot believe that it's just an amazing coincidence that they just happen to be doing everything under the sun, and particularly the New York Times and CNN, to drive excitement and controversy, and it just happens to all go in the direction of their bottom line in terms of web traffic. So, you know, it's weird. It's a difficult situation, I think, for everybody, as we know, because in fact, it may in fact be true that the president does have a cognitive issue that does need to be dealt with and should be discussed. It could be true that the White House, the senior staff of the White House, was hiding that for an amount of time. Those things do need to be confronted. But at the same time, what we know is that there is only one person who's beaten Donald Trump, and that is Joe Biden. There's never a brokered convention in the history of American politics that has led to a win for that party. And the last two times that this happened, where the incumbent president left, which of course was Truman and LBJ, that led to a Republican coming in, Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon. There's no history for this succeeding. So this is an interesting moment for the Democratic Party, and I do think it reflects an inability to turn the page to the next generation, and that next generation is extremely diverse and in a lot of cases extremely black. We'll see what happens.
Joy, here's also where I am a little confused when again looking at all of this. So you've got folks saying, oh, in these swing districts, he's dragging people down. In the New York suburban districts, isn't it the job of the congressional candidate to be making the case to their voters?
This is why I say this is people being lazy. This is people wanting to rely just on the top of the ticket in order to drive turnout. And those of us who actually do elections, who actually work in the streets, who actually do campaign, I think Simone Sanders said that before, it's not just the ticket that drives people to turn out. And in fact, I think I talked about this in some of the tweets I highlighted. You know, the other side, Trump has a ceiling. Right? There is only so many people that the Republicans can persuade. They have their base, and there's only a small amount of persuadable voters that they can persuade. While our ceiling is high. All we have to do is go out and engage with people and talk to them about not only what's at stake, but what we can do. It's important that that next piece is added, because we can't just do the fear of, you know, Project 2025, which is important and it should be part of our, you know, messaging. But we also have to talk about what we can do, and our ceiling is much higher. We're persuade so many more, not only to vote for the ticket, but also to turn out in general. And for a lot of these races that you are mentioning in swing states and swing districts, it's that 2-3% of people who are infrequent voters. That's all we need to do. And so we have too much work to do for us to be, I don't want to be, Roland, as much as I love being on your show, I don't want to be on here talking about this. I want to be talking about how are we engaging people? What is the messaging that is working to turn out those in that 25 to 45 band? What is working to engage young people? That's what I want to be talking about right now. I don't want to be talking about this.
For this news conference, President Joe Biden, it was originally scheduled for 5:30. Was pushed back to 6:30. It's almost 7:30 and still hasn't started yet. Greg Carr, I want to go to you, because as I'm looking at, again, this whole landscape, I always talk about I hate process journalism. And if you're Democrats and you're not talking about great economic numbers, you're not talking about inflation going down, You're not talking about the fact that President Biden, in another month, will under his term, will have created more jobs than Reagan did in 8 years. So you got Democrats who keep going on television, targeting him and not telling a great story. Democrats can't blame that on anybody else but themselves.
No, they can't. But the simple fact of the matter is that, and what what Lauren just said, you know, there's obviously things we don't know. And all of this is contingent on the fact or possibility or hopefully the fact that there's nothing cognitively severely wrong with the President of the United States. Hopefully this is just NATO spilling over or something. Not that will mollify the sharks. They're already on social media talking about the big boy press conference, blah, blah, blah. But let's set that aside for the moment and hope that there won't be something revealed that will all have us say, oh, damn. Let's just hold that, because we started that conversation, if you remember, when we were there for the coverage of the debate. And hey, Aljo, it's good to see you as always, sis. You and Larita seen her earlier here.
Greg, I got to stop you right here. President Joe Biden is coming out for this news conference.
Thank you. Please be seated. Well, good evening. We just concluded this year's NATO summit, and the consensus among the members was it was a great success. It was especially momentous because it represented the 75th year of the most important military defense alliance in the world's history of the world. We should never forget that NATO grew out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact of collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought, as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, but Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia. The capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance, and it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile, my predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear, a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did, and exactly what we'll continue to do. Now, the future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than a political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue. Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer? I believe the American people know. The answer to all those questions is yes. And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We are an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month. Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us that that would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close, but we're making progress. The trend is positive, and I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here. Reuters, Jeff Mason.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside. tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question is incorporating these developments into your decision to stay, and separately, what concerns do you have about Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and Congress running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. Because, look, I got more work to do. We've got more work to finish. There's so much, we made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million jobs. I mean, so things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down, and so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. And officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean, Putin. I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden. Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is, well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful attend in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was. Next one, Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Well, look, I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plans so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, we're going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what? Mainstream economists have said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations, registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. Doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time, for example, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase of corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union, not labor, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history. Not a joke. And guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better. Everybody does better. And we talk about how, for example, remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there and import what the product was. And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to Asia, including Europe, but Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world and you have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is we've invested, there's over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing just coming into being. None of you thought that would happen. None of you thought that would happen. But it's happening. It's happening. It's going to grow economies. All three, and by the way, red states and blue states. Matter of fact, there's as much in red states as blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fairer. And like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well. But the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary.
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I have, I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events. Someone with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to pace myself a little more. Pace myself. And the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before. Anyway, that's what it was about. That's what it was about. And by the way, even with that, I love my staff, but they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway, I'm sorry. Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not, but if he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has and the weaponry we were getting to him? I've gotten him more long-range capacity as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is working. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should and shouldn't go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
Bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or on some matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself, and that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's gotten more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. Who we got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just a few minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I'm not having any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. It'd be a disaster. It'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, because you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. That's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? Because in my office, I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon? And so Finland joined NATO, 800-mile border is a significant, and they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall whether he said it publicly in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50, to support Ukraine. 50. And we were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just met we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it, and we're just going to get stronger. David Sanger, Where's it?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President, the NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of your question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do. What they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating, they're getting access to additional, they're not supplying weapons themselves, they're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through, for real. And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that she believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we have to make clear, China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and as it relates to Russia and dealing with Ukraine. And so for example, if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well, if you want to invest in China, you have to have a 51% Chinese owner. You have to make sure that you do by their rules, and you don't have the authority, and that you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in the market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market. And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules. For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Do you have a strategy to interrupt that impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public. And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in Russia. In China, as long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy as well as help them as a consequence of that, their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any. I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it. But we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons and the ability to, it came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new everything from vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues, my European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate the kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, it's what Russia's trying to figure out. That they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need. That was a discussion as well.
Mr. President, I'm not sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look, like I said, I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. But there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with. But I understand the generic point is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea, look, Putin's got a problem. First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think that Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they've conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage and loss of life. But they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people, particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people. They lie like hell through the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, If we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is. And anyway, but so I think that I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk. Last time I talked to Putin was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes. And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anyone else has. We just put together with, today I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on the group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I already mentioned Australia. And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations. And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target, and I don't take it lightly. Assam from NPR.
Thank you, Mr. President. Asma Khalid with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier, you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement. The answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning, I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. Some of the reporters around here come here all the time and heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me. That's how far back I go. I know Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces staying in Gaza. The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel on the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to get in and out as rapidly as you can all that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port reattached from Cyprus. I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on, because it was not in our. No one's ever going to unite that country. I've been over every inch of that, not every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north. I said, don't make the same mistake we made. Don't think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. We'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and damage. But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing got hurt. It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things, in retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular now. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I just have to keep moving to make sure that we get as much done as we can toward a ceasefire, and get those. And by the way, look at the numbers in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway.
Your bridge candidacy in 2020, you referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth, most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to change.
Last question.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do two more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats on the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or two goes would inform you?
Am I using that way, you said?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out. For the longest time it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway. And so what I'm doing is, and I've been doing, I think we've done over 20 major events for from Wisconsin to North Carolina anyway, to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And here, look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters, I forget exactly how many, I don't want to cite a number and then find out I'm off, but we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized, we're moving, and that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And so, and here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway, I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around, more children are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? We got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still, and I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And I'm not being critical, just observing. The bulk of the press said, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy's not an issue. Democracy's not an issue. Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right. I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege based on this court? Do you think democracy is under siege based on Project 2025? Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service, eliminate the Department of Education, make sure, I mean, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job. I've got to finish this job because there's so much at stake.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember with the staff, I said, I'm going to go to South Korea. We're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it, creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out. Hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times did you? So I am not opposed if my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons inside Russia? And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure. Look, I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time. I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the top if they can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very, at least it was a red state when I started, in terms of where you now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is I understand the self-interest of every candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days? I can give you a series of polls where you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it hadn't started in earnest yet. Most of the time, it doesn't start till after September, after Labor Day. So a lot can happen. But I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch. And, we talk about, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, you have any want to follow up on any of that you just asked me?
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
Mr. President,
This ends tonight's press conference. Thanks, everybody.
respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
More than 40 minutes. President Joe Biden. More than 40 minutes. President Joe Biden answering questions there. Members of the media, if you wanted to see what a real president looks like, what you just saw there, Dr. Greg Carr, was a foreign policy expert methodically walking through something Donald Trump could never do.
Roland, everybody, that's right. I mean, I'm really trying hard not to cuss right now. But what the F are we talking about? This fool, who was that, Roland? Peter Alexander?
Yeah, Peter Alexander.
He stood his funky ass up. Now, 40 minutes. And this is probably a reference most people won't get unless you're an old movie buff. They call it Capricorn, right? It's a Wonderful Life. He had a movie called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Jimmy Stewart played a congressman. The corrupt Congress people in Congress trying to put him out. He went to the floor and did a filibuster, and as the news got out, the public turned against these other people. He just gave a mini version of that. It wasn't a drop dead. He had people to call on. I think it was a brilliant move to get the lady from NPR had the hijab on to ask him about Palestine and to ask him about legacy. He answered every question, knocked it out the box with detail. This fool gets up at the end and says something about this racist, brain-addled. Biden even got Project 2025 in. And here come Peter Alexander. Think about, you said Trump, Steve Harris. What do you mean? And the perfect answer, unscripted, while his staff's trying to get him off stage after he smiles, that smile that you said, we all said 2 weeks ago he should have been giving to Trump the whole time. What does Joe Biden say? Listen to him. And walks out, drops the mic. Anybody, look, if you know something Axelrod or Pluff, if you know something Chocolate Wonder Obama, if you know something James Carville, if you know something Movie Boys, Reiner and George Clooney, if you know something Big Gretch, if you know something Gavin Newsom about Joe Biden's health or something that we don't know, it's time to talk. Other than that, shut the fuck up, Nancy Pelosi, all of y'all, be quiet, because we're not listening anyway, but y'all gonna stop this bullshit. And if you keep it going after tonight, then we know that you're not only dishonest, you're against us too.
L. Joy, okay, he said Vice President Trump instead of Vice President Harris. Later he talks about her. Okay, and. I mean, okay, he said that. The man started going through China, Japan, start walking through countries. We negotiated this, and this. Give me a break.
Yeah, and to make the connection, what you said earlier in talking about some of the data where people watched the debate and, did he have gas and things of that nature and a bit slower than people are used to either him responding or wanting people to respond? Yes, but more importantly, people saw that he was able to speak to policy. Here, he was able to focus on foreign policy, which we know he has the greatest strength in this contest in general. And so people are able to put aside a gaffe here or there. It reminded me, Roland, of when your mom is calling you and she called all the siblings before she gets to your name.
Listen. I got 9 nieces. I got 4 nephews. All right. I can't tell you. So my sister Levita has 4 kids. Okay. Her oldest daughter is Chloe. Her other daughter is Faith. I'll be like, Chloe, I'm like, you know who the hell I'm talking to?
Yeah. But we make fun of my mom all the time. She'd be like, Joy, Tiffany, Kara, and this is like, Mom, I am not Tiffany, right? So we get it, right? But it would be something if that was that gaffe and. But as you said, we just watched him for close to an hour stand and be responsive to questions, answer every single question, go in detail, in depth. And what more do you want? And it's reminiscent of our dearly departed Joe Madison. Is just like, do you want an orgasm? Like, what do you want?
Lauren, I remember Jake Tapper saying, "Oh, he needs to stand up there and do a 2-hour news conference." Dude, come on. And again, you watched him methodically walk through negotiating with world leaders. Let's be perfectly clear to all of the debate people. Donald Trump could never do what we just watched.
Yeah, well, that's obvious. I mean, it's obvious that Donald Trump could never do any of that. He can't answer any questions on foreign policy, period. Certainly nothing in depth on China or Russia or anything else. And that's why the media has to be indicted in this moment, particularly the New York Times, the butthurt emails, New York Times, that's always trying to figure out a way to divert everybody's attention onto something that is beside the point of the fact that we have an extremely dangerous person running for president as the Republican nominee, which is something they begrudgingly bring up. And I'm still confused as to whether or not Joe Kahn or anybody else at the New York Times really cares about the First Amendment, saving our democracy, and protecting us from fascism under Donald Trump, which they have declared they're going to do in a 900-page document. And instead, the New York Times has chosen to invest itself in whatever they need to invest itself in to make money and get clicks to a website. That's what I think they're doing. It's extremely, of course, hard to verify that, but every move that they make is in that direction. And, as for this press conference tonight, there were a few really good questions in there. The journalist that asked the bridge question, you said you were the bridge candidate. That was the NPR reporter. That was a really good question. And I can assure you that the control room back in New York at NBC was in Peter Alexander's ear telling him to, you gotta get up and yell at him about the gaffe. You got to get up and yell and make that clip and make that, we got to get that for viral, whatever, and we'll put it on the newscast. I mean, you could just feel it in Peter Alexander jumping up and just having to ask. But this is what the media has become. This is how they make money. They get it through attention, they get it through clicks, and they'll do anything to get it. It's embarrassing in a time when you have Donald Trump on the ballot. That's really the thing that people need to understand, that the other person is so dangerous. But having said that, I don't think it's too much to ask to get a press conference, once every 2 months, 3 months. And this White House, I think his staff has not served him well. I think they've been trying to hide him. And I think it's obvious that they've been trying to hide him. We understand why that is, but if you're going to do it with your full chest. Hide him. Absolutely, actually do hide him, and don't say anything. But they're trying to sort of pretend and have it both ways, and you can't do that.
I thought, L-Joy, first of all, you saw when guns came up, there was a second wind. Yeah. And that his whole tone changed.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's doing something. He did something in this press conference that, I just said before that we need to do on the ground. He talked about his record and what he has done. He also talked about what's at stake, right? What we need to vote against. And then he also talked about what we still have left to do. Right? He talked about his passion came through, not only in talking about gun violence, but also talking about regulating guns and not girls, right? He talked about that as well. And so he is staying on his message. He is clear about what his role is, to talk about his successes, to talk about what's at stake if this other guy gets in, and to talk about what is still left to do and what we need to do once we are reelected. And that kind of discipline that both he has and Vice President has, that she also talks about, right? The issues and the things that are left to be done. That is the messaging that we should take away from this, rather than, as Dr. Carr has mentioned, just focusing on one aspect, one gaffe in the beginning of the press conference, rather than close to an hour of him laying out that strategy.
He also, which I thought was important, the economic issues. But Greg, Lauren just said something, and this is why I think it's important. And I tweeted this, and I texted to some people. The reason this was the perfect news conference is because foreign policy reporters are not performative.
That's right.
What Lauren said about Peter Alexander, that's White House correspondents. They're performative. And so had he done this in a White House news conference, you would have 30 people trying to go viral. You would have networks wanting to compete with the gotcha question. But you had people who asked questions about Poland, Xi in China.
That's right.
Russia, Japan.
Right.
Those were, that to me was the difference.
That's right. That was the huge difference, Roland. One of them. You know, it's no secret that many of us have deep policy differences with the Republican Party, particularly around foreign policy, probably everybody right here. But that's another day's fight. What Biden did, and you know, there'll be all kind of speculation. Maybe they'll release why it started late, but he didn't go back to the White House. He stayed right down the street from where you're sitting right now at the Walter Washington Convention Center where NATO was being held. He was on a NATO stage, that international backdrop. And when those, and you're right, calling those international reporters, Macron right now, Macronism was rejected in France last week in the election. They beat back Le Pen and that right-wing party, but now Macron is saying nobody won the election. Meaning what? Meaning that he knows that he took the L, but he's not going to concede to his left wing in France. The French reporter gets up and ties Macron in, who is saying maybe we need to back away from this American investment in NATO and beef up our military, because Macron is sounding the alarm saying Europe needs to maybe distance itself from the United States on the issue of NATO and fund our own stuff. I'm saying that because Financial Times reported today that there were people from some of these European countries who met with some former White House staffers under Trump, trying to hedge their bets in case Trump gets back in. Notice he called a reporter from the Financial Times. What you have put your finger on now is absolutely the strategy that he had. One of them, he put the international community on notice to back them off, because God knows that the four corners of the United States continent are not where the conversation ends. These people are on the phones all over the place. And at the same time, finally, and this is where I think, Eljoy, your experience as you're discussing it tonight, and of course over the arc of your work, is very important. This ground game that the Democrats always seem stupidly not to ever really dig into, leaving it to the rest of us, Black Voter Matters, everything Eljoy's been doing, and so many other people. Joe Biden may be in a stronger position now. As he said, the campaign really ain't started yet. We got the Republicans next week, the Olympics, and then the Democrats. He might be in a stronger position now because of what happened in the debate. I'm not saying he is, but consider this. Because, Eljo, I know the first time I saw you physically was when you were in South Carolina campaigning for Kamala Harris. She gets beaten in the primary. There was some ambivalence in some parts of Black communities around her. That has evaporated now. We are all in full lockstep. Y'all go to hell. Y'all trying to attack her. At the same time, they trying to attack Biden. He goes full populist. It's the elites, blah, blah, blah. That's a little taste of Bernie Sanders. And then he comes back. He doesn't erase what happened in the debate 2 weeks ago. However, what he did tonight goes a long way towards saying, what else y'all want? What else y'all got? No, I'm going to take another reporter. Stand back up. Peter, go ahead, ask that question. You know you're going to ask. Ask him. Drops the mic, walks off. He might be in a stronger position if we look back in retrospect now.
Yep.
Than he was before he entered that first debate 2 weeks ago.
Lauren, I'll say this here. And Congressman Jim Clyburn has suggested this several times. And the Biden campaign should immediately do this. Do town halls. Allow him to be able to stay. Did you see the question? I don't know the guy's name. When he said, be nice or whatever, clearly that's a long-time foreign policy reporter. I go back to the Uni Journalists of Color when I was one of the 4 people to interview President George W. Bush. And Bush was 2 things. He could be curt when he wasn't in a good mood. He could be playful when he was in a good mood. I wanted to get him comfortable. I wanted to get him feeling in a nice cocoon, which is why we were able to get 2 questions each as opposed to 1. The reason I'm saying that, Joe Biden feeds off of people. And I think what they should do is say, ABC, we'll do a town hall. MSNBC, we'll do a town hall. I say they should be looking at doing 2 town halls per month. I don't know if he's going to do the debate, but the bottom line is this here. He needs to be in a situation where he can communicate and lock eyes with the voter. That to me is what the campaign should be focused on right now.
Yeah, a few things. So David Sanger is the correspondent from the New York Times, Roland. The other thing is, yeah, I understand what you're saying about town halls. He does feed off of that, but I do have some conflict in trying to figure out whether or not the old Joe Biden, the State of the Union Joe Biden, is going to show up to that town hall, or the June 2017 Joe Biden is going to show up to that town hall. And if I was the person on staff, I'd be incredibly worried about that.
I wouldn't.
Okay, so
I wouldn't. I
just think that.
Here's why. If you're in this, be in it. If you're in it, be in it. And what you do is you make sure he goes to sleep. You make sure you don't overschedule. I mean, that's all controllable.
It is controllable, but you do have something here where you have a clock ticking. You have a 117-day clock, right? So I would say you don't want to necessarily put anything on there that's ultra risky, because you are in a situation now where every single thing that he does is triple analyzed, as you know. And I'll just say this, as somebody who, as you know, Roland, because you helped me out tremendously with this, in 2021, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had to go through chemo. And when you do that, it F's up with your cognitive ability for a temporary amount of time, thank goodness. But I can remember feeling like I could not list things and recall. Of course, these are two different things. Whatever's going on with the president is not the same as that, but I know what that feeling is. And you could see it on June 27 and a little bit tonight, where the president does have some inability or difficulty with a list of things. When he has to list, he will drop out of that sentence and say something like, never mind, I'm going on too long, or something like that to sort of bail out of it. And as somebody who knows what that frustration is, after a while, I mean, it kind of reminds me of what my friends who work on Capitol Hill told me when he had gone to the annual Democratic retreat. He had to have cue cards for that, which, by the way, I don't think there's any shame in any of that. This is the President of the United States. You have so many things on your plate. Fine. But Roland, he is under that microscope. So when you set up a big stage type event, a town hall, something like that, it's sort of a situation where after that June 27th thing, I mean, you see what happened. We're still talking about this. If you had said to me 2 weeks ago, Roland, we were on the show, that we would be talking about this thing 14 days later, there is no way I would have believed that. And we're talking about it. Now this media is in this sort of, and we've seen it before, they're in this sort of rabid phase of everything that he does has got to be overanalyzed. And I think it's just difficult. And you got to win for 117 days. You got to figure out what that is. You've got to be all in, but I think you have to be careful about what events you pick.
Here's the deal, Joy. You don't have to win 117 days. You know what you got to win? The next day. And then the next day. And then the next day. And then the next day. See, here's why. If he is going to stay in, his campaign has got to take risk. But you play to a person's strengths. So what you do is you say, you know what? I'm going to do a town hall with seniors. I'm going to do a town hall with young voters. I'm going to do a town hall with, single mothers. I don't know. But the bottom line is this here. You want to put your guy in a position to where he can show his empathy. His voice is not as strong. Yeah. His voice is stronger than mine right now. His voice is not as strong. So what you do is you let Vice President Harris be the barracuda, be the prosecutor. Let her do that. You let him, that empathy, that emotion with the voter, that's how you use him.
Yeah. The only thing different I would say from your suggestion, Roland, is I don't know that it should be in lockstep in partnership with the media outlets. I think there would be a certain story of the campaign taking their message to those swing states and those swing districts and to the people, and going to somebody's, Baptist church, and I'm going to do a town hall, right? And if ABC happens to come along, that's fine, right? Like that's, like you could be the media partner, but I'm taking my position in terms of to the people.
I understand that, but here's the reality. The reality is you've got to have the guaranteed eyeballs. I totally understand your point, but the reality is, we know how media is. Listen, there have been campaign events that he's done that didn't get lots of coverage, and so at some point you do have to sort of guarantee that you have that media platform. Now, maybe what you do is, and because remember when YouTube had a bunch of their folks with the White House, maybe what you do is you say, I'm gonna do one with YouTube.
Yeah.
See, again, but there has to be a media component because you gotta have those eyeballs.
Yeah. And I think the next call, besides having him, as you mentioned, being able to show his empathy, and which is one of the things that I thought was the greatest problem with the debate, right? I think both of the candidates feed off of the energy of an audience, and it would be detrimental to Biden in general without, whatever his performance was. The other thing is people have to pick the surrogates, the donors, everybody got to pick up the phone and be like, look, he is all in. You saw his response on this, and everybody needs to get on the phone. And the detractors and the people drafting statements of concern and all that stuff have to be shut that ish down. This is what we're doing. This is our nominee. Like, people need to call around, same as people calling and texting and doing secret squirrel things. People need to call and text and strong arm people and be like, shut that ish down. Yeah. These are the groups, the organizations, and folks that we need fully funded in order to continue to do the work that they need to do so that we can reach as I said, that high ceiling of engaging people, right? So instead of you talking and releasing, op-eds and statements, actors that are, well, these are, previous Democratic donors, that's great. Here are the 10 organizations and the 10 groups I need you to max out to continue this. Here are all of the down ballot races, that we an investment in as well, so we can win back Congress, so that I have the Congress and the Senate that I need in order to continue this administration. Because it's not just about electing me, it's making sure that the whole place is not shut down because you have a divided Congress here. So I need the strong arm people on the phone. And if you need to pass me some numbers, I don't care. I don't know, respect the person. I will call somebody from an unmasked number or whatever to shut that ish down. Here are the organizations. Here are the groups. Here's the cities I need you to visit. Here are the places I need you to go talk to. Here is the work I need you to do. And that is somebody in the Biden team, the group of people need to lock themselves in a conference room and make those calls starting at 6 p.m. and moving all the way until all of this is shut down.
So, yeah. So let me woosah before I go here. David Axelrod sent this tweet out, Greg. If what he said at the end of his presser is true, it sounds like Biden's team has not been very candid with him about what the data is showing. The age issue is a huge and potentially insurmountable concern, and his odds of victory are very, very slim. Okay. Here's the problem with that. The Washington Post poll that came out, 85% say he's too old. 75% want him to drop out. The race is tied. Okay? So now I'm confused. See, this is the problem that Axelrod and the rest of these people, for some reason, don't want to accept. It's sort of what Chris Matthews talked about. Sam Stein actually had a column on this today in the Bulwark as well. I'm sitting here going, Roland, is Biden too old? Yes. Would it be great if there's another candidate? Yes. Are you excited about Biden? No. But it's time to vote. It's Biden, Trump. Who you voting for? Trump can kiss my ass.
Duh.
That is the reality. See, so what the Axelrod don't understand is, and we see it in the data. Adrian Shropshire last night, she said it's been a 15-point increase in black support since the previous poll.
Yeah.
She said it's trending this way because I saw that I sent you and Lauren, there was a tweet where this one guy pulled some data and he said when undecideds are pushed as to who they're going to support, 80% break for Biden. So even though people say he's old, want another candidate, they're judging him based upon the buffoon on the other side.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, there's a saying.
Lauren, Greg, go ahead.
That's all right. I'll keep mine short, and then Lauren, please. I mean, this is so important, the conversation we're having. Frankly, maybe we'll end up knowing it. I think we all want to know what David Axelrod and David Plouffe know, what Reiner and George Clooney know, what Barack Obama knows that we don't, because clearly it has them convicted to engage in full-bred idiocy at this point. I've never been a big Barack Obama fan. I was excited that he became president, voted for him, out there campaigning. It's very beautiful. But we got stuck with the bill for Barack Obama. That would be called Donald Trump and Trumpism, which was always present but had an avatar at that point. Joe Biden has been able to get a lot accomplished, more than Obama, and Obama should shut the fuck up at this point. And his clownish advisors, Plouffe and Axelrod, who those soft white nationalists who find Barack Obama palpable because he's not. Hopefully, Wes Moore is who people thought Barack Obama was, because Barack Obama is definitely not that guy, although he can dap up basketball players going to the Olympics and all that kind of thing. But let's be very clear about this at this point. Either they've got to know something we don't, and we need to know it now, because the delegates for the Democrat, and y'all help me, you know, especially Joe, you know the inner workings of this better than I do, but don't they start voting soon? I mean, they start locking in advance of the convention. In other words, this is inevitable. They are acting apoplectic at this point. So either y'all know something we don't, or the alternative, which is terrible to contemplate, but perhaps is easier to understand. This is all politics. Y'all ain't never been down with Joe Biden like that for real. Y'all don't like Kamala Harris, and you scared of Wes Moore, whatever happens next. And the people you closer to, Barry, I'm talking about maybe it's the governor of Michigan, maybe it's your friend in California. You don't want them boxed out because black people may be getting ready to run out of Boston over the next 20 years in terms of the presidency. You're willing to risk all of our stuff, and we still didn't get the things you was running around talking about hope and change for in 2008. But you want to get your finger out the pie and get your funky minders out the pie too.
Yeah, you know, Greg, brutal, Greg, brutal. I think that I think that you have to remember that we ended up with Hillary running first because of Barack Obama, right? Because he was the one that wanted Hillary to go first. Then she ends up losing, and we end up with Donald Trump. Okay.
Right.
When really, if you think about it, it should have been Biden. Obviously, your vice president would probably go first, and then Biden would have probably run would have gone for 8 years, and we would be sitting here right now with this set of issues with regard to his age. I mean, there's an old saying, lead, follow, or get out of the way. And apparently these people really don't want to get out of the way. Whatever it is that they know, Greg, whatever it is that they know that they've just got to tell us, David Axelrod and James Carville and the dude bros of Obama and all these people, whatever it is, they should have known it 2 years ago, a year ago, 6 months ago, when we were deciding on delegates, when we were deciding on whether or not who was going to run again. They should have known it at least 6 months ago. And now.
That's right.
We lost Lauren.
Okay. Yeah.
Lauren, we lost your mic. Lauren, your mic just went out.
Can't hear you, Lauren.
Yeah, your mic just went out.
I mean, I think to her point is that a lot of this, but, remember, let's go back, because even after Biden won, the first thing in the first year or 2 years was all about, do we need to change the vice president going later? Because they were trying to hurt her chances for being the presumptive nominee. Remember, we went through a whole year and a half of, oh, she's not right for this. What is she even doing? What is the vice president, as if, the vice president role is whatever the current president says the role is, right? So there was all of that as well, and we saw that resurgence of trying to jump over her again, as people were trying to put their favorite or who they believed needed to be there, because I guess people were just mad that Black women demanded something, and we got it. So, I mean, that's how I view it. And so now, as we move forward, we've talked about this in the beginning, the complicated process. And it's not just about, as you said, Roland, how does the infrastructure and the money and everything move, but it's also, which we never ever get to talk about in presidential election cycles, is the stronghold that the two dominant parties have on ballot access for presidency in general, and which is the reason why we are at a point where there can't be an independent, candidate or anything like that, because the ballot access for a candidate to actually get on the ballot in all of the states and territories is so convoluted. There couldn't be somebody who actually fit in that position, right? So there is too much, not only at stake, but none of these people that are supposedly have an alternative, which they haven't named, also don't have a detail on the process of how they will get this done. And so you mean to tell me that you see a way in, 115 days, 117 days, that you can get a new candidate on all of the ballots in every state and territory, but not only introduce this candidate to all of the potential voters and get people to turn out and get them to have positions and policy and everything in order for them to win in 117 days? Stop playing in our face. We don't have time for this.
They're just talking.
Lauren, go ahead and finish your point before your mic cut out.
I just think that they're just talking. I think Obama's dude bros and David Axelrod and all of these people, James Carville, who's supposed to be some genius. I mean, if you're a genius, then why didn't you figure out the candidate was going to be 81 when this campaign started? So, I mean, I'm not sure. They don't, to tell Joyce's point, it's like they don't have a plan. This is just them thrashing on TV. There's nothing here other than talking. That's it. They don't have to do the work. They don't have to do the legal work behind any of this. They don't have to knock the doors. So, I mean, with all due respect to Obama's dude bros, I don't think they know what they're talking about. Frankly, I really don't. I don't hear a plan. I just hear we have to get rid of the candidate that you were about to nominate next month. And then there's no plan B attached to it. Well, there's got to be a plan B attached to it. I mean, you can't just say get rid of the candidate and then have no plan. So I don't know what the heck they're doing, and I don't know that they do either.
Meanwhile, Roland.
Go ahead.
Meanwhile,
final
Roland,
comment.
Yeah, meanwhile, again, we're wasting time on this when the RNC, when the Republicans have a whole voter suppression plan where they are recruiting people to be at poll sites and to make sure that they have people in order to invalidate votes and stuff. We have other things to do. Stop playing in our face and get to work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
At the end of the news conference, Joe Biden said, listen to him. Well, watch this.
I think you should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Doc Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas? He was the White House doctor. How good did Elise Stepanek do? You know, we've endorsed Dr. Oz. We've endorsed JP, right? JD Mandel, and he's doing great. Jimmy Connors is good. He's also happy.
Mike Bolton, John Bolton is here. Mike Bolton, as you know, is in Russia. And there was progress today. I look forward to solving it. Thank you, Steve.
It was Trump's fault. It's always Trump's fault. Can it ever be like Rick Gates's fault? I mean, it's always Trump's fault, Rick.
By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, you know, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything? Deleted and destroyed all of it. All of it. Because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people. We have some of our great business leaders and leaders, period, right behind me. I may ask Marilyn Lockheed. We appreciate it very much, Tim Apple. Yes, please, Mr. Kurd.
Thank you very much for your time. You know what was interesting? Joe Biden won against Barack Hussein Obama. Has anyone ever heard of him?
Arrest their leading political opponent, and leading by a lot, including Obama. I'll tell you what, you take a look at Obama and take a look at some of the things that he's done.
And Putin, you know, has so little respect for Obama that he's starting to throw around the nuclear word today. You heard that, nuclear.
Thanks for giving your first comments on the bill on this show. It means a lot to us. We appreciate it, sir. Thanks a lot.
You have a deal. Thanks a lot. Bye. Joe Bright, this guy is just the worst.
So will Christian ever run for president against you? And you heard the prime minister, you heard
Maybe have Matt Blum speak next, because he's been so incredible in so many ways. He fights so hard. He loves his state. He loves the people. Think of it, a new branch of the United States military, United States Armed Forces, called Air Force. I never talked about that. That's something we never talked about.
But what we just saw, we just left pleasure.
Yeah, a very big hello to a place where we've done very well, Sioux Falls. Thank you very much, Sioux Falls. Thank you.
So, Sioux City, let me ask you, and the worst president in the history of our country who is cognitively impaired, we would be in World War II very quickly. The worst president in the history of our country will be a fading nightmare. He'll be a fading, I have fading memory.
I think we can end on that note. Joy, Lauren, Greg, I appreciate y'all being on today's show. Christopher, Lurie as well, folks. That's it. I got to go rest my voice. Hopefully this is better tomorrow. Be sure to support us in what we do, y'all. Join the Breeden Funk Fan Club. So you're checking money order, P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. PayPal, R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And be sure to get the Black Star Network app. Be sure to download it. All right, folks, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Holla. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?